Hello and welcome to LeadingAge Virginia's podcast, Voices in Leadership. I am Melissa Andrews, President and CEO of LeadingAge Virginia, and your host for our third episode. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming Courtney Nuzzo and Theresa Thomas to the podcast. I am going to ask each of them to give a little introduction of themselves before we dive into the meat of our conversation today. So Courtney, welcome. We'll start with you.
Thank you, Melissa. My name is Courtney Nuzzo. I'm the Executive Director of the Lewinsville Retirement Residence in McLean, Virginia. We are an affordable housing property that is managed by Goodwin House. And I've been here about 13 years and am passionate about affordable housing and advocacy for older adults, and am overjoyed to have the opportunity to do this with Theresa Thomas. She and I worked together X number of years ago that I'm not going to tell you. And I'm really pleased to be back and doing this with her.
Awesome. Thanks, Courtney. Yeah, Theresa, go for it. Tell us about you.
Thanks, Courtney. So Courtney said we worked X years ago together, and I think it would be good for everyone to know that we are still employed. So I'm Theresa Thomas. I'm the Associate Executive Director of Goodwin House Alexandria in Goodwin's House in Alexandria. We are a life plan community with two campuses, one in Alexandria and one in Bailey's Crossroads. I think I get up every day and go to work and have a passion for serving older adults, but also love the camaraderie with working with a team of caring and dedicated people.
Awesome. Well, let me start with asking each of you what brought you to this field of serving older adults.
You go first.
Okay, I will. Let's see. I came into the field by chance. I was with a contract company. And so I started out in campuses, and then I went to Philadelphia and did a senior community and ended up at Goodwin House to support a startup. And one Saturday there was a flood. I ran in and they said, "Hey, you're the new manager." And from that day I've been there. I left and came back. So it was by chance, but now it's by choice.
That's so cool that you literally ran into a flood, and that's how you, yeah.
Absolutely.
I can think of otter recruitment techniques. How about you, Courtney?
I came into the field really, but I kind of knew this was a population that I wanted to work with older adults for some time. I didn't know exactly what path, how I would do it, but I'm one of the outliers, I think, that didn't fall into it, but really had an interest in serving older adults for a long time.
You know, one of the things I appreciate about both of you is your passion. You're no shrinking violets when it comes to talking about things that are important to you. And that's really what advocacy is all about. And so, Courtney, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the importance of advocacy and why you think more people should be engaged in telling our story.
Well, I think advocacy is, I am by training a social worker, and part of that is the advocacy that you do for your client in a variety of ways. And I can talk to you about the benefits of social work anytime as well. But being able to try to advocate for people who are marginalized or have some issues is a way to sort of give back to the community, give back to the greater community, either in your own little world, your own little family, your own little community, older adult community, your greater community. But being able to advocate for yourself is important, but also being able to advocate for others is, you just have to do it. And I will give a little plug for our LeadingAge program in March of 2022, I hope. And hopefully we will be able to go back down to the Capitol and encourage everybody in Virginia to come to that, and let's go down to the Capitol and talk to our representatives about advocating for older adults, which is so important.
Yeah, because if we don't do it, who will? There's no question about that. And it is a lot of fun, and it's not as intimidating as you might think coming your first time. So I guess this means that Theresa will be with us when we walk the halls of Congress next spring. I mean, clearly you've just recruited her, right, Theresa?
I think so. But I think one of the things for me, just like I said, being put into this field by chance, you get to be around the Courtneys and other people that teach you about advocacy. And you find out that it's so important that we speak up for others that may not get the platform to.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice segue to kind of the meat of our conversation today, which is really around different populations. We spent some time together at our leadership retreat recently talking about women in the workplace, talking about diversity, period, equity, period, and inclusion, period, to use Kelly Borello's punctuation. So that's what we're here to talk about today. And I think that a lot of that stems from your desire to advocate for other people, right? And your desire to create these inclusive places for people to live and work. And I know that you're both champions of that in your own organizations and your own rights. But Theresa, let's start with you. What does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you, and why are they important?
I think it's important, first off, because it gives us a broader view and the ability to serve more people with an understanding. So when you think about, for me, when I think about diversity, it's everyone. Everyone is invited to participate. The equality comes in with there aren't different standards for different people. And the inclusion is not only are we invited to join the conversation and we're welcome into the conversation, we get to have input into it. We get to help make the decisions. And the room doesn't look like any one particular person, gender, race. It's so inclusive.
Yeah. How about you, Courtney?
I would really echo what Theresa said in terms of giving people a voice, giving people, goes back to the advocacy of giving people a platform. And you know, not just the voice, but as she said, participating in the decision process of policy, of whatever is before that group makes a difference.
Yeah, and I think we're certainly a sector in serving older adults where more people enter it by chance than by choice. And, you know, having people understand that there is room for them in this sector, right? And being able to see themselves in leadership of organizations, to know that aging services is a possibility for them, I think is really important. Can you just share, I think, actually, Theresa, let's talk a little bit about your journey at Goodwin House, if you would, around your DE&I committee, and if you'd share a little bit about what you all are doing, and then we'll just talk about how do you really create a core value for your organization around being inclusive, around inviting different people from different backgrounds and perspectives to the table.
For Goodwin House, we started a DEI committee. We celebrated our first anniversary in July of 2021. So we've only been together for a year. There has always been a diversity effort from Goodwin House, but just focusing that effort into a committee that's representative of our staff at all levels, our residents, and we have representation from our board. So we meet every other week. We started out with just getting a feel for where our communities were as far as on a diversity journey. And we know that we're all at different points, at different places on that journey, but finding a common ground where we can start. So we started with just focusing in on open and honest conversations. We publish what we call Friday Thoughts every other week. And those topics are based around diversity or cultural celebrations. And we also put out a quarterly newsletter. And I thought it was important that the DEI committee did not look like one sector of our community. We have representation from everywhere and all cultures, sexual preferences. So I thought the committee brought together a large view that we could bring in together and help our community to grow. And it's been a great journey. It's had some challenges, of course, because we're at different points, but that's to be expected.
I hope you had cake for your first anniversary.
Oh gosh, we did a really big thing. Yeah, we had cupcakes with different color flags on it. We did cards to give out, asking people to join the committee, to send us your feedback. We have our own email address, so you can send us your thoughts. So it was a big deal.
Courtney, I'm reminded of a conversation that you shared that you had at annual meeting, at the LeadingAge National Annual Meeting one year, when somebody asked you if your community was diverse, and you said yes, and they said, but is it inclusive? So first, can you talk about the diversity at the Lewinsville, because it is a really interesting place, and then talk about, you know, kind of your reaction when somebody asked you that.
So we are, as I said, we're affordable housing here in McLean, and the diversity among our residents is spectacular. I would share a quick story. We were on a trip somewhere, and I was sitting on the bus, and I could hear all these different languages taking place between, I've forgotten who was at war in the larger world community, but you know that we have Iranians and Russians, and I mean everybody from around the world, and we're all able to get along here at the Lewinsville, and it gives me a great deal of hope for the larger world that, you know, we as humans can all get along. And that, yes, that conversation at LeadingAge was a challenge to me in terms of are we being inclusive, and are we being sort of sending out a message that we are inclusive, whether it's, you know, a rainbow flag out front or other things that's what that particular discussion was about.
So have either of you ever felt isolated in the workplace because of differences? And if so, can you just share something about that?
You want to go first, Courtney? Well, I was isolated in Courtney's office. No, I wasn't. So I think I felt isolated in the workplace. And, you know, thinking about that answer now, I'm not sure if it was always my own personal isolation or the environment created it. I think it was a mixture of both. But just being a female in a basically more predominant male field can be isolating. There's always race. I'm an African-American female, so double check mark there. Then there's also sometimes the age factor. So yeah, I think we can feel isolated at work. And when you begin to look at even life balances, I think those isolations tend to make us do a little bit more in trying to set up, we are capable, we can do this, we belong here. And so you don't sometimes move that line of work and life balance, trying to accomplish that. Yeah.
How about you, Courtney?
So I've been reflecting on this question a little bit, and the time that I come up with when I was first out of school, and I was working at a intermediate nursing facility that was run by an order of nuns, and so they were actually Catholic nuns, and I grew up Protestant. So there was, but it was an interest. It was a great experience in terms of management, because the sister really ran a tight ship. So I learned something from that experience. But it was to sort of be on the outside looking into that, because, you know, there's a group where they not only worked and ran this small business, but they all lived together. So you had a real family run business so that you have that kind of, you're on the outside of that. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Theresa, you touched on this a little bit. I mean, do you think that by nature of being women, we have even more unique challenges in the workplace when you think about the fact that there are only so many hours in the day and we have a lot of roles, for me, wife, mother, daughter, employee, employer, just to name a few. And with each of those roles come demands. And so how do we, I guess, how do you deal with that? And then also, how do you create an environment in our field where so much of this is scheduled, right? So much of the work is scheduled. How do you make an environment that is conducive to that work-life balance or work-life integration for your team members?
I think we overcome it by networking. And I'm not saying this because Courtney's on the line, because you know how I feel about her. But I think if I didn't have people like Courtney and other women that I could model myself as coming into this field, it would be overwhelming and it would create a larger isolation. But I've always had the opportunity to go to someone and say, this is really crazy. How do I do this? And when I get that kind of help, it's imperative for me to take it back and make sure I'm passing it down to the next group. So we're examples of, okay, we need to take a day off. So we make sure our staff take the time off and we don't ask questions. You need a day off? Can we fit that schedule? Absolutely. So I think that's it. I think we as women have to support each other so that we don't feel that isolation or that need to over excel, because it can be very real because of the different hats that we wear at work and at home.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Courtney?
So I think in an effort to foster diversity, equity, inclusion in your organizations, you have to do a couple of things. You have to be intentional about it, and you have to provide flexibility, and sometimes it costs you some money.
Yeah.
And I think from a woman's point of view, in terms of all the different roles that people have, whatever they may be, there is a special, at least my observation in many of the folks that I'm aware that I work with, and that you have to give people permission, and that's not the right word I want to use, but you have to foster for them that, their family does come first, and therefore it should come first to me too, so it's that sort of thing, being aware of that and providing the flexibility that people need, I think is the main thing that you can do. That said, I don't think that's a reason that women should, take a back seat to anything. I had a discussion with somebody one time about women and gender salaries, what's equal pay for equal work. And I was talking to this woman, and she said, well, I think I'm paid very fairly, but they've also given me a great deal of flexibility. And it really struck me that that's great, but that should kind of be our standard, because all of us need that, whether you're, especially, I think men of my generation, I relied on the kid's father to go pick up as well, so you've got to, that doesn't have to be a gender issue, but I think being able to provide that to make that acceptable and not a, gee, where are you going now, is really, really important. And I think about my dad, who had a woman lawyer who had just had a baby and was coming back part-time. And she said, I'd really like to learn something about whatever he was practicing at the time. And, he was like, well, I hope I can work it into your part-time schedule. And I thought, yes.
Come on, Dad.
Yeah, but it stuck with me, that's, obviously it's somebody I love and miss, but that's what this woman was dealing with, right? I mean, she had to figure out how, if she was going to move up in the law firm, she had to figure out how to move her childcare around.
Yeah.
And I just think that's something that we need to be really, really aware of. And I think that goes for gender and all the other diversity, equity and inclusion that you have to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think you touched on one really critical component, and that is modeling that behavior. Because I've been in this role 5 years, and I think it took 3.5 for my team to know that I was serious about. I have a former mentor that I worked for when I was at LeadingAge National, and I'll never forget. We were sitting in Tennessee at a Bonefish Grill. I just started as a regional vice president. We're across the table having a cosmopolitan maybe. And I said, hey, listen, on Friday, I've got a doctor's appointment. And she put her hand up and she said, doctors, pets, or family, hair, nails. If you don't feel good, if the people and animals you love aren't taken care of, and if you don't look good, you're not going to be any good to us. So fine, I don't need to know you're at a doctor's appointment because I know the work will get done. And that's the key, is that the work will get done. And we work differently because we're in a travel job. But I do think it takes a while. And so that's what I model for my team, because this whole notion that you can work 9 to 5 and then get everything else done it's somewhat archaic. But also just knowing, I guess one of my questions for you is, do you think that this conversation is catalyzed in organizations because of the pandemic? And if you remember at the beginning of the pandemic, so many people were back to simpler times. I didn't know so many of my neighbors owned bikes or had pets, but they were all of a sudden outside, right? And it caused us to really look inward around what's most important as we were hunkered down. So do you think, especially facing the workforce challenges that we're facing, do you think that these conversations around flexibility, no matter the gender, right? I mean, just in general, are catalyzed because of what we've been through?
I think we have to be careful that we don't. I mean, there are a great deal of studies about how much productivity is higher when people are working at home. And therefore, they're working more than their 8 hours. And I think you have to be careful about that. And again, sort of give people, it's a challenge, say just between the 3 of us, to try to figure out when, so I have the flexibility to go to a doctor's appointment at 8 a.m. and you have to pick up your child at 3 and you have something at 5. So, you have to be, again, intentional about making it work for folks. Again, and I just use that example of trying to pull together meetings and things like that. Mm-hmm. You have to be open, and you have to communicate. That's the key thing, is communicate and remind your team members that it's okay. I'm not going to do your work while you're gone. Don't worry about it.
It'll be here waiting for you.
Yeah. We don't like that little story.
You know how to do it.
Yeah, like it'll be here.
The shoe set, the little elves in the shoes. We don't have that.
And I think, Melissa, you brought up a good point that even with us, with the workforce the way it is now and people working from home, we still have to be very cautious, because sometimes when you're at home working, it's like nonstop. You really don't get up and take that break that you would maybe take at work. You are literally on your computer and doing everything for a full entire 8 hours without a break, because you want to make sure you're being productive. So it's like Courtney said, we have to intentionally have those conversations and let people know the work will be here. It'll be here for you tomorrow. I'm not giving it to anyone else. It'll be here for you. But learn to pace yourself. And I think that will help us in our diversity and our inclusion and everything, to know that we're considering that.
How does that translate to our frontline staff who have to be on the, in the nursing home, in the assisted living, who are there, right? That they don't have the option to work from home. How do we translate this type of culture to their roles?
Well, I think again, everything, and I hate to keep saying that word, but it is so intentional now because it's like the pandemic did. It opened our eyes. The death of George Floyd opened our eyes a little more. So everything is intentional. So when you look at your frontline staff, for me, I love my frontline staff, but the biggest thing is to know them outside of Goodwin House. How's your grandkids? How's your mom? Is she sick? And to be able to pull those relationships that we've learned about them from outside to how we can support them while they're at Goodwin House. So we may know that there is a grandmom sick. Can we alter schedules and make sure this person has the time to be with their grandma? Or can we support them some other kind of ways? Are we giving them the resources through EAP or other programs that we have set up in our organizations? So I think there's a way that we can do that that says, you're not just a frontline worker at Goodwin House. You're another person, and we know that you wear other hats.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard a story from one of our members that they had a CNA that was late, like 10 minutes late or 15 minutes late every day for her shift starting at 7 a.m. And they were really talking about whether or not she could stay. And her supervisor went and said, you're late every day. You're fabulous, but what gives? Well, it turns out her kid's daycare didn't open until a certain point in time. And so she was afraid to ask for her shift to start 15 minutes later. Yeah. But through that, thankfully, the supervisor asked and she was willing to share. And so they said, well, we're just going to shift everything. Like, we're not going to lose you. And you shouldn't have to be stressed out every day, rushing to say goodbye to your kid at drop off. Like we have to work around that because we value you and we understand that you have a life outside of here. And I think that's what you're getting to, that, it could be a point in time where somebody's having a challenge in their life, or it could just be that day-to-day logistical things that we have to know about. Yeah. Courtney, you were going to jump in.
Get your coat on. Come on, get your coat on. I got to get out the door. I'm going to be late for work, right?
Where are your shoes? Where are your shoes?
It goes back to that elves thing I was saying. Yeah, there's a lot of shoe discussion, isn't there?
Although now it's, where's your mask?
Yeah, it's the mask.
At the bus stop, running back to get the mask. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would agree. It's you have to talk to them, and you have to have those relationships with folks in terms of what their needs are and what works for them. Yeah. I will say, from a diversity point of view, sometimes that's a hard conversation to have and be understood as a manager. Okay, so if I ask Melissa and say, what works for you in terms of your schedule? And sometimes it's so new to people that they're like 7 to 3, because that's kind of what they're accustomed to. But again, that's why you have to be intentional and thoughtful and say, okay, sure, that doesn't have to be that. We can have a total come when you can policy if it's going to work better for you. Particularly back when there was traffic around here.
Yeah, right. Well, and I think this goes to, retention is so important with in general, it's important, but it's exacerbated by this workforce crisis. And so keeping the people that we want to keep means, as you said, being more intentional, really asking the right questions, trying to understand where people are, because you never know somebody's story until you ask, and everybody has a story.
I don't know if it was Kelly or Tom at our leadership meeting that said, create a win-win.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you each one last question. This has just been so wonderful spending this time with you, but I want to ask, what's one thing you wish you had known when you began your career? And you, Theresa, you can define began your career any way you want, since you're here by chance. But what's one thing you wish you knew if you were talking to your younger self? Self?
I would say be yourself. Learn and cherish who you are and realize that what you bring to the table, no one else can. And let it get out there. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there to learn and to grow and to surround yourself with people that are where you want to be.
Yeah. Gosh, all of our younger selves could learn from that advice.
So I'm assuming my husband will watch this at some point. So I guess after 28 years of marriage and 30 plus of working in this field, I would say be open to feedback. Is something that I really only listened to after I went through the Leadership Academy, and it was life-changing. And would give that another little plug, both for the DMV Leadership Academy and the National Leadership Academy. Because I remember talking to a guy, I've forgotten what they called him, but your pre-mentor to that program, and he was saying how it was professionally and personally life-changing. And I'm thinking, actually, what do you mean personally changing? But it really is. And I'm sorry it took me so long to sort of hear some of that feedback and be aware of it.
Yeah, one of the things that I think about a lot that I would tell my younger self is imposter syndrome is real and everybody feels it. The only people that don't feel it are either lying to themselves or sociopaths. I'm not sure which, but I think that, and that, that was a good one, right? And the other thing is plans change. I mean, I think, Theresa, about your story about getting into this field, I think of, when you've charted out what you think is going to be the course of your life for those type A people that do that. And it rarely goes like that, right? I mean, there's a lot of the chaos loop is in there, and there's a lot of diversion and possibilities then emerge that you never would have thought for yourself. So being open to those possibilities.
Well, I think it loops back around. It loops back around no matter how crazy the line is and all the twists and turns. It loops back around to our area of passion.
Yeah. Your why.
Yeah.
Yeah. That if you listen to that and that's your compass, right? Then there's really no limit to what we can do if we believe in ourselves and be ourselves and create those cultures where other people can be themselves and believe in themselves and bring them their best selves. Well, I have to say thank you so much to both of you. What a delightful way to spend some time today. I just appreciate you so much. You were very well behaved, the two of you together. This is like this. Next time we got to be in the room together. I feel like, it's that we're like two-dimensional right now. We need to be three-dimensional.
Well, I guess we should all certainly wish everybody happy holidays and a really great 2022.
Yes.
Right?
Right, that's right, because this is the holiday episode. I'm sorry that we don't have any decorations since we tend to record these things a little bit in advance. Well, thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Theresa, for not just this, but for all you do to impact the lives of older Virginians and those that serve alongside of you. We are lucky to have you in the field and lucky to have you as LeadingAge Virginia members. So thank you for taking your time today.
Thank you.
So Melissa, what did you think about that? I wasn't really expecting that, really confrontational stuff that we saw at the leadership retreat, but
fireworks.
But it wasn't. We love them both. They're fine. They're great. But what did you think?
I appreciated their thoughtful responses. I did not know that Theresa got into this field by chance. I did know that Courtney got in by choice, and I love that language. I'm going to start using that, so get ready. And I also just, really appreciate, like they both said at the beginning, they're passionate for what they do, both for the people they serve and the people that they're in service with. What struck you about the conversation?
I think a couple of things, which I kind of know and have learned over the years. One was you really do have to be intentional with your staff. And like they were saying is go to them, ask them, get to know them, especially in this time of really difficulty of being together. I want to note that over the past year and a half when we were working from home, yes, it was true. We are all working so much more than we did when we were going into the office to work, but you made it, intentional to say, okay, we're going to meet twice a week just to see each other, just to be together, just to hear each other, and that's very important, even if you're in the community, to know what's going on the floor, what are people thinking, what are their needs and things like that. So that was one thing. And then the other thing that I think Courtney said was, to me, that on the diversity, equity, inclusion, the equity part, the salary and the flexibility should be the norm.
That's right. I did not react to that when she said it, but she was 100% right. And I mean, I'm guilty of that in my professional life, of saying to my board, what's most important to me is flexibility, and because of my and that. Yeah, that shouldn't be, it shouldn't be a give or take, right? I do think, and I also think that, as you mentioned, understanding the people that are working with you and what their needs are, and that it's not, everybody's life is not the same.
Right, that's true. Being single, never had children, anything like that, I still have all the difficulties of coming home, cleaning house, doing this, doing that you have, picking up your child, getting to go here, getting to go there.
That's right.
It may not be as jumbled up as your life, but it's still, I think you have to realize that everybody has a life outside of work, and it involves a lot.
That's right. Because everybody has relationships. I mean, your water heater goes, it's like there's always something that goes on. And I think it's 100% right. Just because our life circumstances might not be the same doesn't mean either one is more important or needs, you know what I mean? Like it's about being able to recognize our differences, right, and still being able to afford each other the grace to have the flexibility and to roll with it. And I think that's a really important point, and one I think we strive in our office to recognize and to balance, that our lives don't all look the same and everybody has different needs at different times.
It was so interesting that Courtney brought up her first job with the nuns. And
I started having heart palpitations thinking about the nuns.
But it reminds me of when I go to church sometimes and I'm listening to the priest sermonize, and they're always saying, couples listen, couples that. And I'm like, hey, remember me? I don't do the same things. I'm single. How are you? You're single. How are you relating to me or not? You're relating to the couple. So it's like, we're all here on this earth. We all should, listen to one another, just be a part to continue this world in a greater place than,
right,
all that they were kind of saying within the communities. Yeah.
All back to that sense of belonging, and then making sure that everyone feels as if they belong. And single, married, widowed, childless, with child, never able to, right? Like there are so many different circumstances that people have. And I think that Courtney and Theresa are real champions for not just what we do, but again, who we do it with. I just think that they're incredible leaders. And I'm so grateful that they spent time with us today.
I am too. Yeah, I like that, Theresa's comment about, walking in other shoes. You don't know until you find out or ask. And like, you're correct. There's gazillion type of people. We're all different, but we're all the same as well. So in so many ways. Yeah.
Perfect ending to this podcast, this episode, what you just said. So thank you, Paula.
Thank you.